Good morning, everyone. I'm Geeta Venkat. Today, it is the topic is related to the bulk food manufacturing. So we have decided to see what are the basic food safety guidelines which are required in a bulk food manufacturing environment. This session of 1 hour is a very short session. We will try to cover the basic requirements because this is a very elaborate topic. And by the end of the session, of course, when we have any clarifications, we can still discuss further or clarify on another round as well. So let us begin the session. Let us see the topics that is going to be covered. We are going to discuss about the compliance with our legislation, the FSSAI requirements, what happens if we do not um, follow or stick to the requirements laid down by FSSAI, which is Safety Standards Authority of India. And then we will go to the food safety hazards and we'll see how to establish their controls. We'll discuss a very brief on prerequisite programs that are required for any food safety management system. Then we'll move ahead with operational requirements of safe food business. So to provide safe food, what are the aspects that we need to keep in mind? What are the checkpoints that we need to keep in mind that we shall discuss? And then, of course, a very brief discussion on basic of HACCP. So these are the topics of today's discussion. So starting with compliance with legislation. Um, as per our regulation, it is mandatory that any food business operator, when I say food business operator, it would be the food business owners or food business managers. It becomes their responsibility to adhere to the Schedule 4 requirement. And what is this Schedule 4? It is the general hygiene and sanitary practices that needs to be followed by any food business operators. And we also let us see which are the areas that needs to be concentrated on. We need to abide by the registration and licensing requirements, the design and layout of the premises. They need to be approved to help or support in the personnel. It includes hiring of the right people, training them, giving them appropriate trainings, ensuring that the competency level of the people are in par with the requirements for the activities that they perform. So all this is a part of a requirement. Then coming on to equipments. So we will like the equipments that needs to be used in any industry that needs to be suitable enough to perform the job. So we here try to focus on what is necessary and what is essential for food processing, and not what is just buy for namesake and keep it, and that is not our objective. So we will see on that as well. And food operations including storage, so food business operators also have to concentrate on the various aspect of operations, the processing lines, as well as when I say storage, the dry storage, it could be the chilled storage facility or the frozen storage facility based on the activities happening in the organization. So facilities have to be provided. Coming on to cleaning and sanitization. So here again, what are the requirements required for cleaning and sanitization of the facility, cleaning or sanitization of any what do you call, food vegetables or fruits which are involved in the processing. For example, if it's a tomato ketchup preparation or a puree preparation, you have the tomatoes, so the cleaning and disinfection of those fruits as they come in, so that is essential. And apart from that, we also have the waste disposal, which is the liquid waste disposal and the solid waste disposal. So the responsibilities of the food business operators, they just go on and on. These are just a few points that are covered, which are in the prime requirement of any food business operator. And what happens if you do not stick to these requirements laid down by FSSAI? It's a very generalized penalty that is being mentioned, to just to give you an idea. Around 1 lakh to 5 lakhs is the penalty based on the offense, the deviations from the requirement. And in case there is a death of any consumers, it is like you have a 7 years to life imprisonment and a minimum of 10 lakhs in compensation. See, these are just a few of the penalties that is being mentioned to give you an idea. If you go on to the schedule 4, you have very a specific list of the penalties that is being levied based on the offenses that happens because of the negligence of the food business operator. Now, just to give you an idea, penalty of any substandard food. So as it says, anyone either by themselves or through any other person on their behalf manufactures for sale, store or sells, distributes or imports any article of food for human consumption which is considered to be of substandard will be liable to a penalty which may be extended to rupees 5 lakhs. So you can see that for a sale or any handling of substandard food, you have the penalty that is up to 5 lakhs. In case of the processing and manufacturing of food under unhygienic, unsanitary condition, so here, as you say, anyone either by themselves or through any other person manufactures, processes any food article for human consumption under unhygienic or unsanitary conditions will be liable to pay a penalty of up to rupees 1 lakh. So you can see when the FSSAI food safety inspectors, they walk in your facility, they will be going through all these requirements, and if there are any deviations, serious deviations, they are liable to penalize such kind of negligence on the food business operators part. So this is just to give you an idea on the legal requirement and the compliance part. Coming on to the legal requirement for training, it is required that a supervision and instruction and/or hygiene training shall commensurate with work activities. So anybody in the food industry, based on their nature of work in the industry, shall be trained appropriately on the hygiene topic. Now, when you see this, a person in a supervisory role or a managerial role, he will have an in-depth knowledge on the hygiene aspects, an advanced level of knowledge on the hygiene part. At the same time, a person who is involved in the housekeeping, he will have a very basic knowledge on the hygiene, and that is what is expected. What is his contribution as a part of hygiene, as a part of food safety? What is his contribution? So he needs to be trained on that. So as we know, what would he do? He needs to ensure that cleaning is done appropriately when there is no processing or production happening in the facility. He needs to ensure that the chemicals are mixed with the right dilutions. He needs to know that it is stored appropriately under lock and key. These are certain aspects which he needs to be trained on, and that is what is meant by commensurate with the relevant work activities. Persons responsible for the development and maintenance of the HACCP system or other relevant guides must be adequately trained in the application of HACCP food safety principles. So it is a requirement from the FSSAI that all food business operators have to implement a food safety program. Not necessarily just the HACCP program, based on the experience and the expertise of the industry people. There are organizations going way forward by implementing ISO 22000, FSSC 22000. They are all upgraded versions of basic HACCP. HACCP is always an integral part of any food safety management system program. So here we mention about HACCP because this is the basic requirement of a food safety management system, which can be implemented, which is very user friendly, easy to understand, easy to implement. So people in the food industry have to be trained on a minimum of basic HACCP. People who are responsible for implementing HACCP in their organization have to be trained on HACCP implementation to know and understand how it needs to be implemented thoroughly. All food businesses having central licenses or state licenses should have at least one trained and certified food safety supervisor for every 25 food handlers or part thereof on all their premises. The food safety supervisors will be certified and trained under FOSTAC. I'm sure FOSTAC is something which we are all familiar with, which is nothing but food safety training and certification. This is again a part of or an initiative from FSSAI to ensure that the knowledge on food safety and hygiene is spread all over, and it covers various sectors in the food industry, right from, when I say food industry, the manufacturing and processing sector, the catering sector, the street vendors. So they ensure that all people handling food are trained appropriately. So here it is a requirement that businesses having the central and state license, they have to have at least one certified or FOSTAC certified food safety supervisor for every 25 food handlers. So this is mandatory and needs to be kept in mind. If there are no FOSTAC supervisors, then it is a deviation and can lead to penalty. So these are certain legal requirements that we have seen. Let us now proceed with food safety hazards and controls. I am sure this is a very, very basic common topic that I'm sure everybody in the food industry is familiar with. So let us just do a quick recap on what are the basic food safety hazards and controls. You can see the first type of hazard is the microbiological hazard or the biological hazard rather, covering bacteria, viruses, molds, yeasts, and parasites. So all these come under the biological hazard. Then we have the physical hazard. Anything and everything that we can see with our eyes is a physical hazard. A nut, bolt, screw, glass, pin, paper, anything is that we can see is a physical hazard. Then we have the chemical hazard. Chemical hazard can be from through the cleaning chemicals, the pesticides, or it could be from the packaging material, or it could be from the lubricants that are used for the maintenance of equipments. So these are some of the chemicals that can lead to contamination. Fourth one is the allergenic hazard. So these are mainly allergens. We know that in India, there are around 14 food items that is being classified as allergens. So care needs to be taken while handling such allergens. So these are the 4 categories of hazards that we in a food industry have to take care while implementing a food safety program. Now, coming on to the biological hazard, I would say that I would want to emphasize we are concentrating more on the bacterial part because bacteria can grow anywhere, unlike a virus which needs to enter into a living body, be it a plant virus or an animal virus. So here again, in the bacteria, not all bacteria are bad, and we know that because there is some good bacteria which is helping in the fermentation process, where we have the milk turning into curd, or we have the dosa batter coming. These are all certain fermentation activities that is done with the support of good bacteria. Coming on to the bad bacteria, probably I am using a very layman term. This is for everybody to understand. So coming to the bad bacteria, I would classify this as 2. One is the food spoilage bacteria and one the food poisoning bacteria. You must be seeing that we are concentrating more on the food poisoning bacteria. I will tell you why we are not focusing on the food spoilage bacteria. When the food spoilage bacteria acts on any food, when the food gets spoiled, we can identify the spoilage by either a bad odor, textural changes, appearance. So in some way or the other, we can recognize that the food is spoiled. And once the food is spoiled, we do not consume the food, we just discard it. Unlike food poisoning bacteria, the food may seem very fresh, but there could be hundreds of food poisoning bacteria and their toxins. But when we take them in, it results in food poisoning. So this is one reason where we cannot identify the food poisoning bacteria, because it does not affect, it does not spoil the food. This is the reason why we concentrate on the food poisoning bacteria. Coming on to the sources of food poisoning bacteria, let us keep our own industries in mind. You can imagine your own food processing facility or your food manufacturing facility. From where do you think this food poisoning bacteria can enter your respective premises? One is through people, your staff, food handlers, visitors. So people can bring in bacteria. raw food in the sense raw materials. You might be getting your flour or what do you call, sugar, salt, anything that is coming from outside, your raw materials for your processing, they can bring in, they're coming in vehicles, food safety, food carriers. So en route there could be any contamination and they can bring in bacteria. Thirdly, insects. I would say insects and rodents, pests. In fact, they come from various sources. They keep roaming around. They bring in a lot of bacteria. Soil dust again brings in a lot of bacteria. Waste when it is accumulated. And what is a food waste? Like in any food industry, the waste is again the remains of the food itself, which can again decay, decompose. There could be mold growth, fungal growth, anything can happen that again can lead to bad odor. So that invites a lot of bacteria as well. Animals and birds, again a part of pests. They bring in birds, especially they keep coming from different places, they can bring in a lot of bacteria. The droppings of the birds are have a heavy dose of campylobacter. So that is the reason you're not supposed to keep any you should not any accumulated packaging materials. You must have seen, because of lack of space in many industries, the packaging cartons are just stacked outside the premises, or let's say the empty bottles are stacked outside the premises because they do not have space inside. But if there is any bird droppings, I'm sure that entire place is going to have a lot of campylobacter. So we do not recommend anything to be stacked outside, and preventive measures have to be taken to prevent birds from entering the facility also. So these are certain sources from where bacteria can enter your premises. Let us say you have taken enough precautions to prevent the bacteria from these sources from entering your premises. But let us say beyond our control, there are certain bacteria which is entering our industry. Now it needs a suitable carrier to move from one place to another. Let's say a vehicle like a car or a bus to travel from one place to another. Who can be the carriers? Dirty hands can be carriers. Cleaning cloth, cleaning equipments, dirty cleaning equipments can be a carrier for this bacteria. Unclean equipments, utensils, these are all carriers of the bacteria. And finally, whatever care that you may take in processing your product, whatever care, whatever grand packaging that you may give for your product, if you have not taken care of the hygiene aspects, then the bacteria can easily get into your packed product. So basically, your product is still not safe for consumption. It gets onto the ready-to-eat food. So this is how the the food poisoning bacteria can get transferred to your food. So our responsibility is to ensure that we break this chain during our processing procedures. Moving ahead with physical hazards. What are the different types of physical hazards? Where can it come from? Raw ingredients. Why we say raw ingredients? The sugar can have slight mud particles. For example, the the flour can have beetles and weevils if the quality is poor. So we do have sometimes the thread particles or the paper pieces right from the supplier's end. It can come along with the raw materials, the raw ingredients. Secondly, from cleaning materials and equipments. When you say cleaning materials, you might be having brushes for the different areas in your processing facility. Your receiving area will have a particular brush and a mop. The main production area will have a different type of colored cleaning equipment, the brushes and the mops, for example. The brush, if it's an old one, you can see the bristles coming out. The mop, if it's an old one, you can see those threads coming out. So these are certain physical contaminants that can come out from the cleaning materials. Through the maintenance operatives and contractors. Why do we say that? Maintenance people walk into a production facility for some repair activities. They may carry a toolbox with some nuts, screws, bolts, spanners, and screwdrivers. So if they happen to drop a nut or a bolt, it can end up in the food like this, as you see in this picture. So care needs to be, that's why we have something like a toolbox register where the maintenance staff log as to how many gadgets, like how many tools they carry inside, how many screws and nuts and bolts they carry inside for the repair activity. If they have replaced any such nuts or bolts, they will have to register that, and they need to bring back the old ones. So this kind of a tool register has to be maintained to ensure that there is no physical contamination happening from their end. Food handlers and visitors, we know that because the personal hygiene aspects, like the fingernails, they should not have long fingernails. The hair needs to be trimmed. The what do you call, the uniforms have to be such that they don't have any top pockets, so that they do not encourage keeping the pens and the papers inside their top pockets. So these are certain things from the food handlers or the visitors. From the packaging material, what kind of a physical contamination can happen. You might see, loads of flour, the all purpose flour or the wheat flour being in the big sacks. When you open the sack, they have the threads. If you don't carefully dispose those threads, they can accidentally fall onto the food that is going to be processed. Similarly, the stapler pins, generally they come in the cartons. So we generally and when you're happy, when you try to open the carton boxes, the stapler pins can just fly beyond where you can notice. So we try to encourage use of gums or glue boards for cartons and try to avoid stapler pins. So, and what about glass bottles? Accidental breakage of glass bottles, like the ketchup bottles or the mayonnaise bottles, they can help in that they are again a packaging material leading to physical contamination. Notice boards, because many places the use of thumb pins are carried out. These thumb pins can lead to a physical hazard. So we do not recommend use of notice boards with thumb pins. What we suggest is, you have these self-adhesive notice boards these days, which is coming up, or you have the acrylic boards, or you also have sometimes the magnetic boards, which can be used, replacing the thumb pins. Coming on to the buildings, what physical hazard can happen from the buildings? It could be some kind of, let's say, the paint peeling off, a cement, or from the cracks or the crevices falling into the uh, product that is being, let's say, something is passing, some product is passing through the conveyor, but then there is some kind of paint that is peeling, or the rust from the overhead pipes are falling onto the product. So this is again from the buildings. What about equipments? Rust, ill-maintained equipment, a lot of rust can develop. If there is no proper preventive maintenance, the nuts and bolts can be loose, so they can all accidentally fall onto the food as well. Pests, the cockroaches, the flies, we know we have a lot of variety of pests in the industry. So if we do not take proper care, they can also end up in the product. As you can see here, a mouse has been baked along with this bread. Can you see this? This is probably the mouse was stuck to the bottom of the tray while the baking has happened. So that is again a part of a negligence. Last but not the least is the sabotage, which we know where, what is sabotage? When people deliberately add something because of any grudge, in order to get in order to get the opponent a bad name, a person he might not like. So he might want to bring down his image. So purposefully adding something, a pin or a razor blade, anything that he might drop onto the product for which he is not responsible. So these are all different areas through which physical contaminants can enter food. So it becomes our responsibility as a food business operator to ensure that such hazards do not enter the food processing facility. Proper care is taken to prevent such contamination from getting onto the food. So certain things which we can practice to prevent or to control such physical hazards. Implement a glass policy and a glass breakage policy. We have in this food industry, we have the practice sometimes of having huge doors with the French windows, kind of, the glass, so that people on the first floor can see what is happening in the ground floor. So when these glass which is being used should be tempered glass, or if it is not a tempered glass, you have the films that can be pasted on both sides to make it shatterproof. So such things, such care can be taken if you really need glass in your facility. And glass breakage policy, most importantly, glass is not encouraged inside any production facility. Again, beyond which such kind of glass windows, if they are there, care needs to be taken to ensure that daily check is done to see that the glass is in good condition and there is no breakage. And if there is a breakage, you need to account for what was affected because of the glass breakage and what care was taken. So that is the glass breakage policy. Secondly, you need to ensure that equipment and structure are well maintained and in good repair and condition. When I say equipment and structure, it needs to be in a rust-free condition, no paint coming off, no peeling, no crevices, no gaps. So we need to ensure that they are in a good condition. Avoid repairing any equipment in the food room. So when there is a production happening, please ensure that there is no maintenance activity happening. Such kind of repairing activity can happen when the production is shut down. This is in order to take care that there is no physical hazard entering into any food that is being processed. Next, ensure pests don't end up in the food. So that is again in our hands through proper pest management program. Staff training, including the need to report any defects immediately. So our team, the food handlers, have to be trained on informing their superiors if they see something wrong with the equipment, if they find some peculiar working of the equipment, there could be some defect. They need to inform their superiors immediately and in order to notify the maintenance team. No pins or drawing pins in the food room. So as we said, no stapler pins, no thumb pins anywhere close to the food room, in the sense anywhere close to the production facility in the shop floor. Don't use soft wood. We do not recommend use of wood at all, and especially soft wood for probably some stirring activity because of these splinters that would come. Staff have to wear appropriate protective clothing, and in the sense the masks, because you have men have the mustache, the hair should not be falling onto the product. Gloves, so again, gloves in this case to help safeguard the food, uh, to avoid contamination from the hand. So such kind of protective clothing, headgears, again to prevent food from the hair from falling onto the product. So such care needs to be taken. So these are certain control measures to prevent food from falling onto the product. Next, moving ahead with the chemical hazards. From where can the chemicals enter into your facility? One is through deliveries. So when your raw materials are coming in, you have some sacks of sugar, some sacks of salt, the flour coming in. Ensure that the vehicle has not carried any chemicals or lubricants in the food carriers along with your product. That could lead to a chemical hazard. So that is why inspection of the vehicle before you unload your raw materials is very essential. Next, packaging material. We ensure that the packaging material that we use are food grade packaging materials. What happens if you do not use food grade packaging material? We must have seen a lot of these snacks that is being sold sometimes in the roadside. The product inside smells plastic. That is nothing but leaching of the chemicals from the packaging material onto the food. So here we need to ensure that we use only food grade packaging so that the products that we are going to pack are safe for human consumption. So how do we ensure this? So the suppliers of the packaging materials have to provide the food grade certification for the packaging materials that is being provided. So the ink that is being used for printing, they also generally are food grade materials. The ink that has to be used for the date coding, they are also food grade materials. So such care needs to be taken to ensure that the food is safe. Maintenance operatives and contractors, mainly because they carry the lubricants and the WD-40 in their hands in order to attend to the equipments. So such cases, if people just leave it by the side of the equipment and then just they walk off, that by accidental spillage can again lead to a chemical hazard. Cleaning chemicals, if they are not stored in the appropriate containers, if they are not stored in appropriate cupboards, generally chemicals have to be stored in under lock and key. But if the housekeeping staff can just leaves such chemicals in the production facility, accidental spillages can happen, can lead to a chemical hazard. Pesticides, generally we do not recommend any spraying of pesticides inside any food manufacturing or a processing facility. Main reason, the spray can accidentally fall onto the food that is under process, or secondly, the what do you call, the pesticides are usually sprayed for cockroaches and the flies. These can actually, they don't die immediately. If you spray, for an example, if you spray on a cockroach, it takes a while before it dies. So in the meantime, it would go and cross contaminate different, it would carry these chemicals, they would spread those chemicals to various areas, and that can lead to a chemical hazard. And to identify that it is dead, it takes time. We wait for the line to see that the cockroach is dead. So the best thing is to avoid spraying chemicals. We recommend the use of what do you call, a physical control rather than a chemical control. So use of electronic fly killers is again a physical method where you catch the fly dead or alive. You have the cockroach monitoring glue boards. This again catches the cockroaches live. You have the rodent glue boards as well. And the physical trap used for rodents helps to catch it live. So these are the control measures that we have. Then last but not the least, the additives, the food additives. We need to ensure that we stick on to the recommended dosage of the additive that is being used, be it preservatives or the colors. Anything that we use has to be within the prescribed limits and as advised by FSSAI. FSSAI has given a list of approved additives, what can be used, how much it can be used, for what quantity it can be used. So I recommend all food business operators to abide by the recommendations given by FSSAI while using the additives. So chemical hazards, we understand the sources. So let us see how we can control these chemical hazards. You have the staff instruction, training and supervision for your team to ensure that deliveries are checked upon arrival. If they are not suitable, they need to be rejected. Chemicals have to be delivered separately, so be it the cleaning chemicals or the lubricants that are being used for food processing, everything has to be delivered separately. No cleaning shall happen when the production is on, especially nothing, should not be exposed. No pesticide treatment, if any, risk to food. So here again, we do not recommend pest control treatments when the production is running. So only when it is shut down, pest control treatments need to be done. No food shall be stored in old chemical containers or vice versa. Correct dilution and rinsing of cleaning chemicals has to be followed so that there is no residues of the chemicals in the equipments. Chemicals not stored in food containers or with the food. So that care also needs to be taken. People who are handling the chemicals have to be trained on all these aspects, and it is a responsibility again of the food business operator. So here, coming on to the allergenic hazard. So we know that it is nothing but an immunological response when people with a low immunity, the body reacts. They do not accept certain kind of food. That is because of certain kind of proteins which is not accepted by their body. So what can happen? That can lead to an anaphylactic shock, just nothing but rash all over the body. They can sense some burning sensations, swelling of the lips, gums. They could have difficulty in breathing. People who are hyperallergic to certain food products, it can be fatal for them as well. So we know that there are certain ingredients, common foods that is being listed or categorized as allergens. People are intolerant to nuts, especially peanuts and tree nuts also. Milk, there are people who are allergic to lactose in milk. People allergic to eggs, especially the yellow, the yolk of the eggs. There are people allergic to fish, soya, people allergic to cereals like wheat, rye, barley, oats. So that is why we now have the gluten-free. It's the gluten content which is the allergen. So we have the gluten-free bread. So a lot of gluten-free products that is in the market to address people who have less immunity towards gluten. The sesame seeds, the mustard, celery, these are certain allergens which are categorized as allergens, and we in the industry have to ensure that if we use any of these products, any of these ingredients in our production, we need to address this, communicate this with the consumers. And so how do we control that? How do we control such hazards? Communication. How do you communicate with the consumers? Through proper labeling, instructions given on the label saying that may contain traces of nuts, or this product contains milk and gluten, milk and egg. So such kind of allergen advice is mandatory on the labeling. Apart from that, effective staff training, because when they handle the allergens, they need to practice proper hand washing. They need to know what can happen if they don't handle the product carefully, if they don't wash their hands carefully. So all such kind of a training has to be important to the staff. Apart from this, you can avoid allergenic contamination by ensuring you have approved suppliers. So you might be getting sugar. At least they are not kept along with any nuts. They are not brought along with almonds and cashews, for example. So this also can lead to cross contamination. So approved suppliers ensure that the contaminants are, the allergens are not placed with the products that you intend to buy. Suitable packaging, ensuring that there is no cross contamination happening. uh, Improper packing again can lead to cross contamination. Segregation, separate preparation area, separate equipments. That is why we have the certain, like when you chocolate manufacturing, this chocolate is being prepared in the same line as that as processed peanuts, chocolates or something like that. You have some kind of a declaration given on the labels. Discard or any labeled contaminated products. So discard any contaminated products if you anything that you visually see as contaminated. So this again, a part of a training has to be important to the team. Next, coming on to cleaning, people handling such allergens have to practice thorough hand washing. The equipments have to be thoroughly cleaned prior to processing and post processing as well. So care needs to be taken. And of course, in the production facility, you might have separate lines to process allergen-free products, and another equipment to process products with allergens. So based on your equipments, you may practice the cleaning. You might design your cleaning programs. Coming on to the prerequisites. What do you mean by a prerequisite program? As the word says, these are certain requirements which has to be in place before you proceed with implementing any food safety program. Procedures including good manufacturing practices that address operational conditions, providing the foundation for a HACCP system. So from the definition, it is very clear that prerequisite programs are it gives a very strong foundation to HACCP. If the prerequisites are not implemented properly, then the HACCP system or any food system can be a failure. So here are a few examples of the prerequisite programs. You have to have a supplier approval, an approved supplier, and for which you might have to have a procedure in place to qualify a supplier based on the product, based on the quality, based on the pricing, based on the delivery terms. So all this comes in a part of the supplier approval program. You might go for a supplier audits to qualify them, to see their facility. You need to be convinced that yes, they are going to be a good supplier. They handle good the products carefully. So this care needs to be taken to in order to qualify a supplier. So you need to have a proper procedure in place to implement the supplier program. It does not stop with this. You have to continuously monitor the performance of the supplier. You need to evaluate them at the end of every year to keep them updated, to keep their approval qualified. Next, coming on to cleaning and sanitation. All food business operators have to ensure that they have a cleaning schedule in place. When you say cleaning schedule, it has to cover all the areas, what has to be cleaned, how it has to be cleaned, what chemicals need to be used for cleaning, who is responsible for cleaning, and the frequency of the cleaning. So such information has to be written down. It has to be available to the entire team to ensure that the cleaning and sanitation happens. The information is given and we need to record that this was done as required by the schedule. So these things also comes as a part of cleaning and sanitation. So this again is a very wide topic. The cleaning staff have to be trained appropriately. They have to be trained on handling of chemicals, storage of chemicals. So these are all part and parcel of the cleaning and sanitation. So you have to have a procedure developed for the cleaning and sanitation procedure as well. Training and staff competency. Yes, as we have already discussed the legal requirements, all the food handlers have to be trained appropriately on food hygiene, and people who are responsible for implementing HACCP have to be trained on the HACCP principles and implementation. And as we know, all the safety supervisors have to undergo the FOSTAC training and be certified from FOSTAC. And also the food business operators have to ensure that staff are competent. If people have to be trained appropriately, programs shall be organized to ensure that they are competent enough to perform their job. Next, coming on to pest control, proper procedures should be in place to ensure that pest control treatments happen. The pest management is done appropriately, because pest control is just one step where treatment is done to kill or catch the pests dead or alive. But it becomes the food business operator's responsibility first to prevent them from coming inside. If they come, you catch them dead or alive. And after the pest control activity, it is again in our hands to ensure proper cleaning and sanitation, so you do not give proper food and place for the pest to stay. Do not encourage the pest to come and inhabit your place. So these are all some responsibilities carried by the food business operators as a part of the pest management program. Operator hygiene, we know about the personal hygiene care that needs to be taken. Apart from that, the hygienic practices that needs to be followed by the food handler. All this is addressed as a part of the operator hygiene. Plant preventive maintenance. So preventive maintenance program for all the equipments have to be in place. It could be a daily maintenance or a weekly, a monthly, quarterly, a full maintenance for the maintenance program for all the equipments in the facility, including the electronic fly killers, the tube lights, the air conditioner. Everything shall be included as a part of the preventive maintenance program. Control of water supply, water coming into the facility have to be portable, and we need to ensure that it is coming from a reliable source and is of a proper quality in order to use it for the food production. So there again, you have to have a suitable procedure for ensuring the water supply is right. Incident management, recall and traceability. Incident management is nothing but in a situation where there is a food poisoning, happening after consuming your product. What care can you take? How can you recall your product? How can you trace your product? Coming to recall, when you say that there is some problem with the product and you need to pull back, what is a recall? What is withdrawal? Recall is something where something where you have already sold your product. It has reached many consumers, and you will have to announce to the public through media, through newspapers and radio announcements or televisions, that this particular batch of product has got some problem and you need to pull it back. This is very similar to the recall that we often see in the automobile industry about recalling cars. Even in the food industry, you must have seen that the dairy milk chocolates being recalled because of once it happened because of wrong packaging. Once probably some people noticed worms in the chocolate, so they had to recall. That is possible only if you have a good procedure in place. If you have a good system in place, you will be able to recall your product well within time. Withdrawal is a similar activity, but it is not sold yet. It has probably just reached your distributor, so it is not announced. You can just inform your distributor that there is a problem with that batch of the product, and you will have to just replace it. So that is very quiet, unlike recall, which is announced. Traceability is something where you can in a food industry, we are responsible for tracing our products one step backward to one step forward. When you say one step backward, until your supplier of those materials, of your raw materials. One step forward is you will have to trace it until your first customer. So this is possible when you have a proper coding system from the raw material till the finished goods, probably batch numbers, lot numbers, date coding. You have the what do you call, so in some of the packages we have the time printed, the line, processing line, the number. So these are all done to ensure proper traceability. So you in this industry, you have to maximum try to trace your products to the best possible until the best possible stage of implementation. Premises and equipment. This again, you need to ensure that they're properly. Premises have to have a proper design. You have to have proper facility in such that there is no backtracking. The flow of activities should be unidirectional. So let's say in any food industry, you have a receiving area, you have a storage facility, then you have the main let's say a preparation facility where you are weighing the dough, you are mixing, blending, etc. And then you have the main production facility where the pasteurization is happening or the baking activity is happening, any thermal treatment is happening, followed by a cooling activity. After cooling, then probably there is the packing happening, packing, date coding, labeling, finished goods store, and then dispatch. So you can see this activity has to be in a unidirectional way, and there shall not be any backtracking to avoid cross contaminations. Equipments have to be in such that you are able to clean each and every part of the equipment thoroughly. You should be able to disassemble them, clean, assemble them. If it is a juice industry or a milk industry, you have huge pipes running. You should be able to have proper cleaning in place type of cleaning activity. You should ensure that each and every nook and corner of the equipment is cleaned thoroughly. Basically, the equipments have to be designed suitably. Calibration is again another prerequisite. All measuring equipments, monitoring equipments have to be calibrated at least once annually. And based on food safety aspects, I would like to say, now let us say you have two weighing scales. One where you have in the production facility, you are weighing some additives, where you have a calibrated weighing scale measuring in grams or milligrams. So such kind of weighing scales have to be calibrated for food safety aspects. Let us say you are having some other weighing scale in your receiving area, which is going to weigh the weigh bridge, which is going to weigh tons and tons of your raw material. So that again, I would say from a food safety point of view, that does not hinder any food safety. That need not be calibrated. But it is a legal requirement from the Weights and Measures Act that all monitoring and measuring equipments have to be calibrated. So whether it is contributing to food safety or no, all weighing equipments and monitoring equipments have to be calibrated. That's a requirement. You need to have a procedure in place. Waste management, you need to have a procedure for how to handle liquid waste, how to handle solid waste, what kind of precautions are taken to discard the solid waste. You accumulate a solid waste on a day-to-day basis, how it is discarded outside, how it is being disposed of. Is there any municipal authorities taking them away on a regular basis? How is the liquid waste being treated? Is it being used is it being sent to an effluent treatment plant? Is it being used for recycled, for utilizing for another procedure? So such kind of procedures shall be in place for waste management. If you have an in-house laboratory, good laboratory practices is very essential, because probably for sampling activity, you might walk into the production facility with 2 beakers and a lot of glass containers. So you need to ensure that you do not contribute to any glass breakages. So care needs to be taken so that there is no cross contamination happening. Appropriate procedures shall be there for all the prerequisites. See, here we have discussed only a few of them. If you think about it, you will have many more coming in. And adding on to the prerequisite programs, please ensure that you have procedures in place for all of them. So the main purpose of a prerequisite is to ensure that your production happens in a good way. There is safety. Safety is not compromised at all during the entire processing and production happening. This is to ensure that to control the general hazards which may affect all or many areas, products or processes. So you have a pest management program. You don't have to worry about flies in any of the areas. So similarly, they are all generic controls which are in place to prevent contaminations happening throughout your food processing. So if you look at this, the most important one is the management commitment. Management commitment is very essential, because there you can fit in the food business operator, food business manager. They are the ones who are approving and providing proper resources. When you say resources, it could be material, it could be machinery, it could be methodology, it could be money, any form, right? So resources are provided by the management. Proper hygienic design and construction of the facility is required. Adequate facilities, when you say adequate facilities, storages, dry storage stores, you have the frozen stores, chill stores, depending on the activities. Let's say you have the what do you call some juice industry where there is flavoring, you have some flavors, they need to be stored in the chiller or a cool place. So, or you might be storing some margarine, or you have the bakery industry, you might have to provide a chilled facility for that. So based on the requirement, facilities have to be provided. Appropriate equipments to ensure that processing happens smoothly. Apart from that, you have the good manufacturing practices, good hygienic practices followed by food handlers. So all these are very generic. As you see, they come under the prerequisite program. Certain things which is not controlled by the prerequisite programs are addressed as specific hazards through HACCP. So that HACCP is a separate program which concentrates on the more significant hazards which can affect food safety. So that will be discussed at a later stage. Now let us look into the operational requirements in a food business. Now coming on to the law relating to HACCP, since 2011 when the FSSAI released their first version, ever since it is a requirement that all food businesses should have a food safety management system in place, and that shall be based on a HACCP principles. So as I said, you can have an ISO 22000 program, you can have a FSSC 22000 program or BRC program, anything you can have, but everything is based on basic HACCP principles. And what are the HACCP principles? You have to identify the hazards, you have to establish critical control points, you have to set limits to measure the critical control points, you have to have suitable control measures, you need to monitor them, take corrective action, verify the system if it is safe, establish documentation, and review if it is important for changes. Now, these are some legal requirements, and this is what we do in HACCP, and we will go through that quickly. Now, certain control measures in a food industry, let's say during receiving of deliveries or loading, unloading, what can happen? Hazards at this stage is contamination and multiplication. What do you mean by contamination? From the people, from the vehicle, contamination can happen. And in this atmosphere, bacteria can just multiply. How can you control them? You have proper suppliers. You ensure that the packaging is intact. If it's a chilled material that is coming, ensure you're receiving it at less than 5 degrees. If there is some frozen item coming, ensure that it is being received at minus 18 degrees. And if it is frozen or chilled, ensure that they are transferred as quickly as possible within 15 minutes. So these are some control measures, but how do you monitor them? Check the temperatures when the vehicle arrives. Check the vehicle temperature, check the product temperature, general condition of the vehicle, and the date coding, the production date, expiry date. All these have to be monitored, and please record them appropriately because this will be used for traceability aspects. If you think it is not suitable for accepting, please reject it. So reject unsatisfactory deliveries because you don't allow any affected product into your premises. Once it enters your premises, then it becomes your responsibility. If it is of chilled food storage, here again, contamination can happen from the, you can see from the fans. This is a walk-in chiller. So if with the tube lights, condensation, all cross contamination can happen. If the temperature is not okay, it can lead to multiplication of the bacteria also. So what control measures can we maintain here in a chiller or a freezer operations? Temperature, if it's a chiller, less than 5 degrees. Freezer is minus 18 degrees. Separate all your raw materials and finished products, please. I can, in many industries, after the baking step at certain times, it is being pushed into a chiller for rapid cooling. Please do not do that if it is storing some raw materials. Ensure that you have separate chilling facility for storing raw materials as well as for finished products. Ensure that all the packagings are covered intact. Labeling is available, showing the manufacturing date and expiry date. Stock rotation has to be followed to ensure that the first in is first out. So does not lead to any spoilage of the raw materials. Okay, ensure that the chiller is kept clean, freezers are kept clean. In case of freezers, ensure that the packaging is intact, otherwise it can lead to freezer burns. Don't overload any chilling or freezing facilities. It should be only up to the load level recommended for that particular facilities. Ensure that the doors are always kept closed, walk-in chillers and walk-in freezers. In such cases, how do you monitor them? Check the temperatures at set frequency every 4 hours or every 2 hours based on how you require that to be monitored. Check for the condition of the products kept inside, the date codes. Ensure that the raw materials and the finished products are kept separate. This is a part of the monitoring aspects. Next, coming on to the dry stores, what can be the hazards? Contamination and multiplication. Contamination can happen. Let us say there is some, the air conditioning is the water is dripping from the air conditioner. If that is going to seep into any dry, the atta bag or the wheat or any other bag, it can lead to fungal growth, mold growth, which is nothing but spoilage. Apart from that, pest activity can be seen if it is an ill-maintained dry store, and that can lead to multiplication of bacteria as well. Control measures for a dry store: keep it dry, keep it cool, well ventilated and clean. What is the ambient condition for a dry food store? The recommended temperature is 25 degrees. In India, our temperature is soaring beyond 36 and 40. So that is not considered as an ambient temperature. Ambient temperature is always 25 degrees. So try to see that it is also maintained in a chilled condition. Storage, ensure that nothing is kept direct on the floor or nothing against the wall. A minimum distance of 5 inches have to be maintained from the floor and a similar distance of 5 inches from the wall. Safety aspects, 1 meter is maintained away from the wall. Basically, it is done to prevent or avoid pests from settling down in those areas. Stock rotation has to be practiced. These are some control measures. Monitoring, observation, daily checks, condition of the packaging, date coding, they have to be daily checked. And corrective action, if you find any spillages, any packaging damaged, any contaminated product, out of date product, please discard them immediately. Care to be taken during preparations, control measures, hazards can be cross-contamination, multiplication of bacteria. The more the time in the ambient conditions, bacteria can definitely grow. So these are certain hazards. Control measures, you minimize handling as much as possible. So these days we have a lot of automated systems in place. So minimum handling, the more safe the product could be. Though it is not mandatory, if people can take care of their hands, the personal hygiene is taken care, this also can be avoided. Good hygienic practices, minimize time in the danger zone. If it is going to be an already processed product, danger zone is between 5 and 65. So ensure that your product is not exposed for a longer time in case of any chilled product processing. Clean as you go. Any spillages and that is happening, ensure that that area is cleaned immediately. Don't leave those spillages for a longer time because that can encourage pests. Cleaning as much as possible, use the disposable cloths so that it minimizes cross contamination, and wherever possible try to use color coding to ensure that in terms of cleaning of this particular the preparation area, use a separate brush or separate mop or any cleaning equipment, separate color coding of the uniforms for the staff to ensure that people don't move from one place to another. These are all types of steps taken to minimize cross contamination. Any product, if you find it contaminated during the course of preparation activity, please discard them immediately. Control measures during heat treatment, any thermal processing, could be baking, pasteurization, sterilization, canning activity. So any such kinds of heat treatment, please ensure what could be the hazards. If you do not give proper heat treatment, it can lead to survival of bacteria. Bacteria which is there, you do a heat treatment to kill bacteria. So if you do not do the treatment properly, it can lead to survival of the bacteria. And of course, contamination hazards are always there from the surroundings. So what control measures can you implement? You process adequately such that the product temperature crosses 75. So a minimum 75 degrees shall be maintained. So you can see that generally when pasteurization is done, it is done at around 80 degrees or 88 degrees. When there is a heat treatment and a ultra heat treatment of milk, it is done at 135 degrees. So when something is being baked, the oven temperature is set at 180 degrees or 200 degrees. So such high temperatures can definitely help in killing all the bacteria. Apart from that, please ensure that the food is protected from contamination at this step. Monitoring at this stage, how will you monitor this processing? Check the temperatures, check for the time aspect also, because always we have a time and temperature control. Check for the texture of the product, the color of the product, and also whatever steam is being generated. Ensure, because can lead to condensation. Condensation can help in or will lead to mold growth, dripping of water from the condensate. So care needs to be taken. All these have to be checked regularly. That is monitoring. Corrective action: if the heat treatment is inadequate, extend the heat treatment until you reach the desired temperature. Some control measure, or if the temperature is adequate, you can extend the time of treatment. As we know that the thermal processing is a time and temperature combo treatment. This is during the cooling of food. You have hazards of contamination from the people, and which can lead to multiplication of bacteria. So you need to ensure that the product is adequately cooled prior to packing, because otherwise it can lead to condensation of the product. As I said, it can lead to a spoilage of the product, packed product later on. So segregate improperly processed product. ensure there is good hygienic practices followed, check the time and temperature of the cooling activity as well, and most importantly, a general supervision for all such activities is recommended. So corrective action in case of any deviations, please discard the contaminated product. Hazards during packaging, again contamination and multiplication as you see in the case of packaging. Contamination, it could be a contaminated pack as we see cartons being stacked outside, or if there is a, let's say, a snack food industry, you have those films where the chips or any fryams are being packed. If they are not stored appropriately, if they have been exposed in the storage facility, a lot of dust accumulation could be there on them. That can lead to contamination. Bacterial multiplication will, due to dust, bacteria settle in the dust, can lead to multiplication of bacteria as well. So some control measures during packaging, if it is a chilled product that you're packing, ensure that you maintain a cold chain. You have those frozen products coming in, the frozen parathas coming, you have frozen, the vegetables these days, sweet corn, the lady's finger, they're all like frozen products coming. So in such cases, when you do the processing, ensure there is a cold chain that is maintained. Thorough cooling, ensure thorough cooling before packing. Check the date coding and labeling. Ensure that proper date is being imprinted into the product. Good hygienic practices have to be followed even at this stage. Monitoring, check the time and temperature. During packing, ensure that the product is sufficiently cooled and packed in the right condition. So a general supervision is also recommended for monitoring the activity. Corrective action, discard product if the cold chain is lost. This is in case of, as I said about the chilled product. If the cold chain is lost for more than 2 hours, please ensure that you discard the product. And as a result, please notify the supervisor, call the maintenance personnel to find out why the deviation happened and correct it. So here, just trying to discuss about the calibration of the thermometers. We need to, of course, do an annual calibration where the third party tests our thermometers and gives a certificate saying that the thermometers are working in a good condition. They're accurate, more precise. But when we use it constantly in our food processing production activity, our hygiene officers or the food safety inspectors are checking the process lines of as and when required. So here we need to ensure that we do the internal verification of the thermometers from time to time. What happens is when you're walking through the production facility, you might tend to drop the thermometers twice. So we need to ensure that they are still working in a good condition. So in such scenarios, how would you do that internally? You can do it by using either a cold water where you're using melting ice. The temperature, the thermometer should indicate -1 to +1. So that means your thermometer is fine. Or you may use boiling water. The thermometer should read 99 to 101 degrees. So it means that the thermometer is working right. So this is just for internal verification. Apart from this, an annual calibration of the thermometers have to be done at least once annually. And while checking and recording temperatures, what we have to keep in mind from the food safety aspect is we need to use a clean, disinfected, and a calibrated tip-sensitive thermometer or an infrared. So infrared is the most widely used where you don't have to touch any product. You just have to check the surface temperature of products. If it is any product, let's say you're cooking or rather than that, a baking product, you need to check the internal temperature of the puff or the the puff that is being cooked or the samosas that is being made, for example. So all this can be checked by using the probe thermometer. And when you're doing that, ensure that you have a 30-second contact time. And we do not recommend the use of a dial thermometer. Why? Because it keeps on fluctuating. We do not recommend bimetallic coil thermometers. Record temperatures in accordance with the HACCP plan requirement. So here, as per HACCP, we need to record all temperatures and times, whatever that is being monitored have to be recorded appropriately. So these are some of the measures that we need to take when we are using a thermometer. So once until now we discussed a lot of prerequisite programs. Once we have a proper prerequisite programs, we know that the foundation is strong. Then we proceed with implementing HACCP. And how do we implement HACCP? It is a 12-step process. As you see, the first step is to assemble the team. The team is usually a multidisciplinary team wherein there are representatives from each department. In a food industry or whenever there is a HACCP being implemented, the responsibility is mainly thrown on the quality department, saying this person is a quality person and he is responsible for HACCP. No. HACCP team it includes representatives from all departments. Let's say a person from the maintenance team, from the purchase team, from the storage facility, some person from the dispatch team, laboratory representative, definitely the quality assurance team member, uh, any other any other departments that the HR person from the HR shall be a part of the team. So such people together work as a team to ensure that the HACCP works strong. Why do we need a multidisciplinary team? A person working in the production, he does not understand what the maintenance people what they would face in terms of safety. Similarly, a person in the purchase may not understand what the production team is facing. So each one is considered experts from their respective area and shall be a part of the team. I would recommend people from the accounts also be included because they have to approve our finances and ensure that HACCP keeps going, though it is not mandatory. Okay, once you assemble the HACCP team, we try to go and describe the product for which we are going to do the HACCP study on. Let us say it could be a rusk, or it could be a biscuit, or it could be a juice, any product that you might think. So you have to describe the product. What do you mean by describing? What are the ingredients in the product? How does it look like? It is a brown flat biscuit? Okay, maybe it has got sugar granules on top. So this is kind of describing the product. How it is processed, basically the main processing that is being used. What are the physical chemical parameters recommended? What is the microbial parameters recommended? What is the shelf life? How do you intend to pack it? What is the primary packaging? What is the secondary packaging? How should it be stored? How should it be transported? So all this comes as a part of description of the product. Thirdly, coming on to intended use. Who is going to be your target customer rather? Who is your target customer and how should they be using the product? Target customers could be general public. If it's a biscuit, let's say, it's a general public. A child who is 1 year old until a person who is 90 years or 100 years can definitely consume the biscuits. Unlike milk, let's say you have an infant formula that is intended for children below 1 year, formula milk. At the same time, you have the normal milk powder that we get for the adult use. They are again specific, not suitable for children under 3 years. So here again, you are defining your target customer. Gluten-free bread. This is designed for particularly for those people who are affected because of gluten. Okay, so such kind of target customers you have to identify in the intended use. So who is your target customer and how they intend to use it? Is it a ready to consume, or is it going to be they need to mix it up with something and have? How can they have it? Next, coming on to, after identifying the intended use, construct a flow diagram. It's nothing but a sequence of steps starting from receiving of the raw materials until going through the storage, processing, main production activity happening, cooling, packing, date coding, finished product storage, and dispatch. So you are going to ensure that you include all your raw materials, including the packaging materials, in the flow diagram. So after that is done, you are going to do the on-site verification of the flow diagram. See, whatever is being discussed, it is done by the HACCP team sitting in your respective conference rooms rather. So the flow diagram is done on your board, the whiteboard. And so during this time, you might have included some additional steps or you might have missed out on a few steps. So that is why the step number 5 is very essential, which is the on-site verification of a flow diagram. When you go on site, you might realize that you have missed out on 2 steps or you have included 2 extra steps. So kindly amend the flow diagram, correct it then and there, and confirm. That is a very important step. Coming on to the 6th step, you have to, for all the steps that you have done on the flow diagram, for every step you identify all the potential hazards: physical hazard, chemical hazard, biological hazard, and do a hazard analysis. When you do a hazard analysis, keeping in mind your end customer, you will come across a lot of control measures for these identified hazards as well. So, and most of these control measures are your prerequisite programs. So you can't say, when you say that there could be a fly, there could be a cockroach, you have a pest control. Or you can say that the person is handling, his hand is touching, so there could be a cross contamination, we have a personal hygiene or a good hygienic practices as a control measure. So for most of the hazards, when you do a hazard analysis, when you identify some hazards, your control measures mostly will be the prerequisite programs. During this step, when you list your hazards, there could be certain points where the general prerequisites are not able to control. At that point, you will try to determine the critical control points. What do you mean by a critical control point? It is a step in the process where you have to establish a control, because if you don't establish a control at that step, that can lead to a food safety hazard. So let us say in your production, you have a last step of controlling a physical hazard, the last step of controlling a biological hazard, the last step of controlling a chemical hazard is your CCP. Let us say in a bakery industry, you have the sifting of the flour or your ingredients as an initial step before you weigh the ingredients. Similarly, as it goes through the entire processing, in the end, you have a metal detector. So here, the first part where you have a sieve, that could be just a control point. But when there is a metal detector, because that is the last step of controlling the metallic hazards or identifying a physical hazard, that becomes a critical control point. So similarly, a biological hazard, wherever there is a heat treatment, where there is a killing of bacteria happening, that becomes the last point of control of a biological hazard. Chemical hazard, now for example, you are having, let's say, the packaging material. Packaging material, leaching of chemicals can happen in a production facility. You're depending on the packaging material. So receiving of these packaging materials, receiving of food grade packaging material, will be a CCP. Just an example, it might not be a CCP. This is all, let's say, identification of CCP is done by the HACCP team. The expertise of the HACCP team can contribute to identifying whether it is a CCP or no. If not, we recommend the use of a Codex CCP decision tree to identify CCPs. So once the CCPs are identified, you have to set the limits. What would you what should you be checking? You set critical limits. Critical limits are a value which separates acceptability from unacceptability. Let's assume that the pasteurizing temperature during the ketchup preparation is 88 degrees for 30 minutes. So if I say minimum 88 degrees, 87 degrees is unacceptable, but at the same time 89 degrees is acceptable. So as you see, it is a minimum or a maximum value which separates acceptability from unacceptability. Once you set your limits, you start checking them. So that is where you have a monitoring system for each CCP. And as you monitor, there could be deviations. Every day is not perfect, so there could be some deviations. Now, for every deviation, you need to have a corrective actions in place, corrective action procedure in place. Now, when I say establish corrective action procedure, you need to understand that HACCP is not still implemented. We are only developing procedures. We are establishing the limits. We are establishing a monitoring system. We are establishing the corrective action in case there is a deviation. Once we establish that we have the above 10 steps running, how do we know that we are doing the right thing? We implement the system. Once we implement the system, we establish verification procedures. Verification procedures are to check whether the above 10 steps are running effectively, whether the prerequisites are implemented effectively. So once verification is done, 12th step, we have the documentation and record keeping. Documentation and record keeping serves as evidence that all the above 11 steps are implemented effectively. So this is a very shortened version of the HACCP implementation. It generally takes around 3 months, I would say rather 2 months at least to develop a documentation, and a further 3 months at least to implement the system and verify. So probably to 6 to 8 months to implement an effective HACCP program. So now amongst all these 12 steps, there are 7 principles of HACCP, which starts from the 6th step. Conduct a hazard analysis and establish control measures is the first principle of HACCP. Determine the critical control points is the second principle of HACCP. Establish critical limits for each CCP is the third principle of HACCP. Establish the monitoring system for each CCP is the fourth principle of HACCP. Establish corrective actions is the fifth principle of HACCP. Establish verification procedures is the sixth principle of HACCP. Establish documentation and record keeping is the seventh principle of HACCP. So to consolidate, HACCP is implemented in 12 steps and it includes 7 principles of HACCP. So with this, we complete a very brief note on the HACCP system. So with this, I come to the end of my presentation. Now probably let us go ahead with question and answers. If there is any, I am willing to, we can discuss it right now.
Thank you, Ms. Geeta. And we have a question from Mr. Mukesh Srinivasava from Godrej.
Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Mukesh.
Mukesh, we are manufacturing edible oil and vanaspati at Vadala.
Okay.
Yeah, this program was very nice. Generally, we are having all this HACCP and all that principle we follow, traceability and record keeping and everything. We are FSMS certified company, and the program has given very good enlightenment and very better idea of HACCP and hygiene system. Thank you.
Thank you so much for letting me know. Thank you.
May we have Mr. Ranjit Kumar from Sodexo, please?
There is any particular procedures for manually dishwashing? There is any changes due to this COVID-19?
Okay, when you say dishwashing, you're talking about a catering facility.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so here again, when you say dishwashing, of course, I'm not taking questions on catering, but then yes, I'm just answering your question. Dishwashing is generally done when the initial rinsing is done at let's say a 45-degree temperature of water, correct? And when you have the soap solution, you're mixing it, it is being treated at a particular temperature of 45 degrees where the washing happens. Finally, there is a sterilization where the water is heated, treated, or water that is around 88 or more than 80 to 90 degrees is being used for sterilization of all those dishes, right? So that is more than enough to kill the bacteria present.
Thank you.
Can we have Ms. Divya Saxena from Compass?
Yes.
Hello, Ms. Divya?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Ma'am, I would like to say that the training and the session was very good and very informative. And thank you so much for letting my knowledge increase. So, really thank you, ma'am.
Mr. Parimal Joshi.
Good morning.
Yes.
Yes,
the presentation was very good. only thing I wanted to find out was what are the specifics that apply to the COVID-19 operation as put out by FSSAI in the new guide dated 15th April. Can you highlight that, please?
Okay, so here, see, these are certain mandatory things that needs to be practiced as recommended by FSSAI. In simple terms, like when the food handlers are entering the premises, starts from checking their temperatures and the health conditions on a day-to-day basis prior to entry. You know, right from that point, and they need minimum number of people are recommended inside the production facility. Let's say you have 50 team members or food handlers in a particular shift. We are recommending, or what FSSAI suggests is take half the number of people only during a shift, so that there is minimum number of people in the production facility at a single point of time. So let us say you're operating in 2 shifts. You need to increase the number of shifts to 3 so that the production still happens. At the same time, the number of people present in the premises are limited. Thirdly, about the hand washing. Hand washing has to be rigorously practiced. Hand sanitization has to be rigorously practiced. Sanitation, we are suggesting the alcohol-based sanitizers to ensure that the microbes are killed. Cleaning and sanitization of equipments, we are suggesting isopropyl alcohol, which is more than 70% of alcohol, with more than 70% of alcohol content, or there is the quaternary methyl butyric acid, which is suggested by FSSAI. Basically, suppliers of chemicals through their material safety data sheets can suggest chemicals which is ready to fight the coronavirus. Coronavirus is a very generic term, okay, because now to be more specific, what is running currently is the COVID-19. It is that is specific, but coronavirus in general is a very common virus. So isopropyl alcohol is recommended to disinfect equipments. So, and with regards to fruits and vegetables, definitely the chlorine with 100 parts per million to 150 parts per million, depending on the soft and hardness of the fruits and vegetables, is recommended. So these are certain things. Now, I don't think I can detail everything. These are a few specifics which is recommended by FSSAI with regards to COVID-19 precautions for food industry.
Can we have Mr. Swapan Banerjee, please?
Hello.
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 Madam, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah.
His question was, is there any data or review on spreading COVID-19 through eyes? That was the question which came up. Yeah.
Okay. No, one thing I need to stress, there is no evidence that the COVID-19 is spreading through food. It is only through people who are handling the food.
He is talking about eyes, madam.
Eyes?
Is there any, yeah. Is
Eyes.
COVID-19 being, is there any review or review on spreading COVID-19 through eyes? That is what he wants to know.
Let me just clarify. Are you talking about EYES or ICE?
EYES.
No, right now there is no information as such. I am not aware of any information as such.
We have Miss Asha Balasubramaniam.
Ma'am, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Ms. Asha. Yes.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. Thank you for a wonderful session. It was pretty informative. Ma'am, my question to you is, most of the training programs, what is happening is for the big size or the large scale industry. So I'm from a background of a small cafe where my staff is only 3 head count. So I didn't get the other gentleman's name who asked you for a question on how do we wash the utensils. So then you spoke about it has to be in 40-degree temperature and things like that. But we don't have that kind of facility. You know, we are a very, very small size cafe. Usually you see these kind of cafes. So what kind of training program would it be suitable for us from FSSAI And also in the initial stage, you mentioned about training the staff. At least one person should be trained for a 25 head count. So if my head count is only 3 people, then how do I train them? And how do we go about this?
See, even if it is only 4 numbers, the FOSTAC supervisor certification is not required. But at the
Okay.
same time, there has to be one person who is knowledgeable about food safety.
Okay.
Okay,
But
who's got a
for
thorough
example,
knowledge
if
on food. Yeah. Sorry.
yeah, for example, if I have taken the training
Hmm.
and if I have the certification, would that be sufficient to train my staff?
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Okay, great. And how about the other training, ma'am? Because whatever training or the safety measures, what everybody across the industry or even FASTAG has been giving is for mainly a large scale. But then for a small cafe, it is not there. So we are just kind of following our basic stuff like, cleansing of hands, the surface what we touch periodically is being cleaned, our equipments is being cleaned. That's what we are following. Now, is there any
See,
other?
I'm sorry. See, the prerequisites, for example, whatever that we discussed, irrespective of the size of the organization. Say
Yeah.
today's topic, it is to do with a larger industry, but then this applies even to a small organization, as you said, if it has got only 3 people or 4 people. But
Yeah.
the measures that you take will be limited. You don't have to go in deeper, but to an extent possible, you can definitely implement.
Yes, actually, we are
To an
just
extent possible.
Okay, we are maintaining a register as to what cleaning procedures that we are following, and then we are signing up every day. Would that help?
Definitely. See, I would just want to clarify one thing here. When we say HACCP, people think that you have to maintain a lot of records. Let me be very honest. Nowhere in HACCP they say you have to maintain 100 records or 200 records. Let us say we need 5 informations. Okay, if you are able to give all such information in one particular register, we are more than happy. Okay.
Okay.
So
Okay.
there is no, yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Most welcome.
Thank you, ma'am. And I'm sure that most of them would be interested in knowing about what you train and what is your other activities, also how you can help them out. If you can share your contact details with them and tell a little about what you can help them with.
Definitely. So yes, first of all, as we are coming to the end of the session, I have to thank each and everybody for attending this session of mine. My contact details are given in this particular slide, my email ID as well as the contact number. You can reach out to me for any clarifications. I will be more pleased to answer your queries. I am mostly in this organization. We try to focus mostly on food safety related training programs. Let's say an awareness program, an implementation program, or an internal auditor program. I cover the HACCP programs, ISO 22000 programs, FSSC 22000 programs, as well as hygiene trainings, the basic, intermediate, advanced level programs. So these are certain things, and apart from that, I also customize trainings based on the client requirements and the industry, because as you see, the discussions mostly are very generic, but when it comes to specific industry, we get into we customize it into more specific applicable kind of a training for that particular industry. And so this organization, we are focusing on the consultancy and training for all different industries, not just industries, the catering, restaurant operations, as well as small to small, medium, large industries as well. So this is what we focus on, and I will be more pleased to help you out in case any of you have your requirements.
And we have Mr. Shashi Kumar, one last question for the day.
Okay. Kumar, yes.
Good afternoon, madam.
Good afternoon.
I have one question.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yes, please go ahead.
We are calling from hotel industry to understand about FASTAG team. In our kitchen team, we have 50 team members cooking the food.
15.
50.
50. Okay.
See what you have mentioned in that previously you have briefed. For 25 members, we need one supervisor.
Correct.
Okay. This FASTAG training, can we have online or how to do that one, madam?
It is being
Can-
conducted by approved, FASTag approved trainers, and it is generally public programs.
Okay.
Yeah, you need to just check out on these whenever they are organizing. There are many FASTag approved training providers who schedule their programs, and you will have to register and
Okay.
attend. It is actually a one-day program which you will have to attend.
Okay, madam. Okay. Thank you, madam.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for the wonderful presentation and insights. I'm sure that most of them would have benefited out of this. And we will also help you to get connected with them. And you can also share your answers with them. Most of them have written to us on the chat box. And most of the questions would be answered by first trainers and Geeta madam. Thank you so much for the session. And stay tuned for the next upcoming sessions as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much also. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. Thank you so much.